development and also into environmental management. We've also started creating a bit of a small provincial treasury by appointing directors for finance for the very first time since independence into provinces. And this has allowed us to disperse funds to those provinces so that they can be able to have an oversight on what they're doing within the provinces. Within the first 5 years as well, we managed to achieve a clear monitoring strategy and evaluation and learning approach to how provinces were driving projects. Essentially, we had central government parachuting into local authorities doing projects without the provincial councils. You will realize also that in 2023, the harmonized elections gave birth to the provincial councils. It's unfortunate on behalf of government that we have a situation right now where events has overtaken the legislative arm or the legislative framework of what we're supposed to do as a country. So we are amending the provincial councils bill so that they become standing orders for provincial parliament in courts. So that's where we are currently. We've also managed to ensure that each province is now very clear about the endowments. So we had to map endowments as well within the last 5 years, which was if you go to Mashonaland East, what is found in Mashonaland East? If you go to Manicaland, what is found in Manicaland? And whatever is found in Manicaland, what is the comparative advantage between that province and other provinces, between that province and within the SADC region, between that province and the whole of the continent, and how can we basically be able to lure investors to come through. So this is where we've been. It's been a fascinating journey in terms of having to put devolution in place, but it has come also with its own challenges, particularly that the expectations of the public and the knowledge of devolution is very limited. So we're going to be concentrating these next 5 years in ensuring that we start pushing now to ensure that the whole country understands what devolution is and that the whole country can be able to also appreciate the small gains and the wins that we're achieving.
Very interesting indeed. And as we proceed, devolution mechanism, walk us through the mechanisms of devolution that will power provincial economies with fiscal planning, administrative powers, and actually being devolved, how provincial spending authority links to NDS2, and what funding flows ensure provincial delivery capacity is not undermined.
So the first thing which is there is the central government. We have to devolve. There's no two ways about it. Devolution is not a choice, it is the law. Devolution is not a nice to have, it is something that ought to have been done 10 years ago. So where we are from the amendment of the Constitution in 2013, we have no reason as government why we should fail to implement devolution. The first thing we have to understand is what is the architecture of devolution. So in our context, devolution means that we start planning bottom up. We don't plan from the top going down, of which since 1980 we've been planning from the top going down. So when the Constitution was amended and saying let there be 3 tiers of government in line with other unitary states around the world, the agenda was to ensure that we have a bottom up approach. And so 1983, the Prime Minister then issued what was called the 13 Principles of Devolution. And the 13 Principles of Devolution and Decentralization gave birth to rural district councils, gave birth to all those people being employed by the Public Service Commission. And it started a journey in which government started decentralizing. And within the 90s, we had other places now issuing IDs, other places issuing birth certificates and so forth. So where we are now, we've taken a step further. In this next 5 years, we're going to reinvigorate the village development committees. Why are we reinvigorating the village development committees? Because planning starts at village level. And those villages have to work with their councillors so that we can then be able to take the information, the plans, the challenges, and everything else that the villages want to the council level. And from the council level, we should be able to very clearly be able to articulate to say what needs to be done in village A, what needs to be done in Ward 1, what needs to be done in Ward 2. Automatically, that spells out what needs to be done in the entirety of the local government. And automatically, that spells out what needs to be done in the entirety of the province. So, having done that, it becomes easier for each province, 10 provinces, to submit their strategic plans to address grassroots challenges, to address grassroots opportunities, and feed them to central government. The other way of doing it, central government may announce that we'd like to grow the GDP by 21% or by 5% or by 3%, whatever it is. We have to then work backwards as well and say, what does each province have to offer to that growth index. Now, you asked me how is it going to be measured. We have come up now with 7 indexes which we believe are going to transform this country in the next 5 years. Working with Zimstats, the Office of the President and Cabinet, through Presidential Affairs and Devolution, we put a team of economists and statistics guys together. And we managed to come up with, firstly, a manual on how every single province and local authority is going to contribute towards the calculation of the provincial GDP. Because we cannot talk about a 49 billion Zimbabwean GDP when we don't know how much Bulawayo province is contributing to that GDP. At the same time, we've come across with the provincial poverty index. And I want to announce to the viewers in Zimbabwe that that's a first for us, because we are the first country on the continent to come up with a formula for provincial poverty index. And this is something that has shocked even the United Nations, because it's something that our young guys and ourselves have sat down and said, we can do it. If we can calculate the GDP, we should be able to have that correlation. As the GDP increases, we need to see the poverty going down. Apart from that, we've also come to the fact where we've come and said, let's calculate provincial employment index. Now, every country, everyone wants to talk about unemployment, which is good. But you're talking about 17 million people. Not all of those 17 million people are work-going ages. So we have to then take an index and say, from this age to that age. So in our case, from 18 years to 65 years. We start working and say, what is that population? Then we work backwards. So each province, how many jobs have you created? Because if we dwell on the negative, it's difficult to notice the small gains and how many of us are achieving those gains. So we've now started saying each province, how many jobs have you created and where are they? So we have a team which goes around the country to verify and validate. The other thing we've looked at as well is provincial tourism index. So what used to happen is each time you want to talk about tourism, one province in the rural provinces will tell you, oh, we actually do not have Rainbow Towers here. We do not have the Victoria Falls. But Zimbabwe is one of those places, unique places around the world, where anywhere can be a wildlife sanctuary. Anywhere, even your own village map, can be a wildlife sanctuary. So we started opening up their minds and said, tourism. The definition of tourism is when an individual leaves their domicile, leaves their local point where they stay, and go to another location, whether for leisure or for insight, or whatever they want to do. So at the micro level, when you leave your ward 13, and what we used to do, you are a tourist.
Yes.
Yeah? So end of the day, if we are seeing all these places where they are doing pahuku and all those places along the highways, those should be categorized also as tourist destinations. I'll give you a good example. As you drive towards the Norton Toll Gate, there's a place called Pahuku. That place between a Friday and a Sunday hosts between 2,000 to 3,000 people in and out. They host more people than the Rainbow Towers. They host more people than any other place in Harare on 3 days. And yet we're not calculating the statistics through the Mashonaland West Province. They just thought it's one of those places. But tourism is the experience. So wherever a person gets an experience, that's domestic tourism or international tourism. Then we have obviously the provincial production index. What are you known to produce? So gone are the days where you just sit and fold your hands and say, we've got bad soils. But every part of this earth, you can grow something even in the desert. So what are you growing? If you're growing traditional seeds, if you're growing pineapples, if you're growing vegetables, if you can't do maize, what is the alternative? That's why we've got all these farming regions. And then from there as well, if it is industry, what do you produce? So this came out of mind because sometimes we'd ask provinces, you have gold, right? Yes, we do. How much did you do last year? We don't know. We said, okay, how do you say our endowment is gold, and as a province or as a local authority, you don't know how much gold you've produced in a year? So what becomes your baseline and what becomes your target? So what we've done, we've changed that mindset, and we've started saying that we need to know, you need to know, as the tier of government, what is going on in your backyard. If you're producing wheelbarrows as a province, how many? If you're manufacturing all this heavy duty equipment, boilers and stuff, Cochrane, how many are you making? And we've started noticing that. So I'll give you an example. Nyati breweries, sitting in Mashonaland West, just on the periphery of Harare province, they are making 6 million liters of alcohol. That's a month, right? And now they're expanding to 12 million liters. We have to know what is the impact of that expansion onto the provincial GDP, onto the national GDP. Okay. We've also gone and said we want to look at the provincial investment index. Let's talk about Zimbabwe. Yes, we've got so many billions of dollars that came through foreign direct investment. But the mistake we've been making as a country, we've not been accounting our own domestic direct investment. So our DDI is supposed to guide us to simply say, how much money is coming from you and me that we're investing back in the country? And so if you look at it today, we're the only country, one of the few, where you look any direction, any property being built is being built by cash. That's investment. So we have more Zimbabweans reinvesting, we have existing investors in Zimbabwe reinvesting, and we have new investors coming. So when they land, they're not landing in Zimbabwe. They'll land in a village or ward somewhere in this country. And we need to track and say, which local authority has enjoyed the most investment and why? So I can give you the boom of tourism facilities, hospitality facilities in Bulawayo. It's because Bulawayo is clean, Bulawayo is organized, and Bulawayo is consistent in their policies as a local authority. This is the only local authority, them in Mutare, where they treat water and you can drink it from the tap. So things like that makes it easier for them to be able to say, okay, how do we calculate the investment and what are some of the things, comparative advantages which are lowering, and we perfect those. The other thing which is very important for us is the Human Capital Development Index. So we've got all these polytechnics, which ideally under devolution should be under the local authorities. We have all these universities which should be under the provinces, and then we have the national education institutions which are under the central government in a devolved manner. But as it is right now, how many of our graduates are then going into industry? And how do we put those synergies? So yesterday, for example, I was touring Edgar's, and one of the things that we've started doing as government is to encourage local government, to encourage provincial governments to say, work with your education institutions to not only train, but also give work experience. So I'm happy to say that right now, as I speak, we have students who are coming straight from NUST into Edgar's designers. We've got students coming straight from polytechnics into Edgar's designers, and some who are doing all this fashion and fabrics courses straight into the work environment. We don't want to see an environment where we train people in a province and they do not have the opportunities in that province. We have to be able to train people, and within that province there are opportunities. Otherwise, why are you offering those services? So let's go from a micro perspective. Every province needs to train for its industry. So if you know you're a mining province, then you have to have more mining related training. If you know that you are an agricultural province, then you have to have more agriculture related training. And then you pick your niche from there. And obviously, lastly, we're also looking at things like Provincial Infrastructure Development Index. What infrastructure have you built, both on private and public sector? So we've kind of cleared the way, and how we're going to measure is that way. I'm happy to say that we've already put this in the performance contracts of ministers of state starting this year.
And lastly, as we wrap up, for NDS 2 through devolution, can you please provide a provincial economic roadmap aligned to Vision 2030, identifying the priority sectors, expected economic impacts through productivity investment, and timing for results, and the performance dashboard provincial governments will be scored against with what the targets will versus what targets maybe would have been missed?
Look, basically for us, we want to grow the economy in line with NDS2. So we're not looking at anyone to grow the economy, the provincial economies below what NDS2 is stating. So one of the things that we're doing as well, how you measure that growth is you have to formalize. So currently we've got between 25 to 30% across the entire country of people who have informal business. And that already gives you the tax base that we have. The rest is people that are informal. So one of the things that we have said is that for us to be able to achieve a clear roadmap for economic prosperity with the province level, we need to make sure that 99% of the people operating in your businesses are all formalized, including vendors, because it's nothing new. In 1980 to 1990, we had hawkers license, where every vendor would get some form of licensing, and this would actually help, because then they would actually be able to say, this is what we have received, and they would actually be able to say, with what we have received from this hawker, it's a flat-based tax. So from where we are, we're saying let's formalize those businesses. But most importantly, I think I've already spoken about the indexes, how we're going to measure them. From where we are, we want to first note the statistics. Which are they? Let's get to the bottom of the statistics. If it is production, what are you producing? If it's a yield, what are you producing? When you get to that notion, then you can be able to say, this is how I want to grow my economy. But if you don't know what is being produced in your own province, what is being produced in your own local authority, then it's hard for you to say we're developing the lives of our people. So a good example, yesterday, I took His Worship, the Mayor David Coltert, on a tour of his local authority, because I'm of the opinion that mayors and chairpersons of local authorities, they should get involved in economics. They should get involved in production. So when I told Edgar's, I was with the mayor and the provincial minister's office and said, let's get to understand this business and how do we take it from one point to the other. You will recall the president visited last time, I also visited, and His Excellency told us, well, if their challenge is power, let's make sure that we don't disturb them. For the last 1 year, 6 months, they are on zero load shedding. One of the only industries that we've done that for. And we've seen them build their capacity from 75,000 clothing units a year to 463,000 clothing units last year. So it shows you that there's a progression, but you need to know your space. You need to know your country. You need to know who exactly you're trying to assist. So it is something which can be done.
Thank you so much, Mr. Muguti. You've given us a lot to digest and very well articulated.
Thank you. Thank you very much, man.